We need to reinterpret the Ukrainian conflict from a different perspective. The war is the consequence of the conflict. The war does have its own timeline and sequence of events that triggered each step until the moment that we are today. If we go backward, far enough until the beginning of the conflict, we could understand the problem between both nations. Many times, a conflict involves more than one cause. At the same time, we should interpret the different dimensions of the conflict. In this case, a measure to prevent may have avoided the conflict, meaning that we did have, theoretically, the tools and mechanism, but we weren't able to prevent and act at time. The war is not justified. It's the result of the failure of diplomatic means. We as an international community should assume the responsibility as well, as it is our commitment to prepare ourselves to avoid and prevent every possible conflict. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine began within Ukraine, when the former government of Ukraine decided to suspend indefinitely the association agreement with the European Union on behalf of a three-way trade commission between Ukraine, EU, and Asia. That decision triggered the Euromaidan, what ended in the Revolution of Dignity, what it was considered an illegal action against the government. Civil unrest, violent actions, occupied buildings, deadly clashes. This is the key point of the analysis as the ignition of the conflict. The previous actions were the government decision to suspend and provide with a three-way solution. A political decision in that moment, the action would have been the political debate within the government through the mechanism available for the opposition or any other representation, including the civilian, to argue or provide with an alternative. The protests ended with the deposition of the former president and the intervention of Russia within Crimea and Donbass region. In order to understand the political conflict, we need to interpret the context to realize both the relations between Ukraine and Russia, as well as Russia within the international political context. At the same time, we should interpret the prevention of the conflict. In this case, it would imply a wider dimension that goes further from an international geopolitical point of view. First, the previous context from 2014. Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine are descendants of the Kievan Rus since the first millennia AD, the same land where today is Kiev, Ukraine. They share a common origin, history, and culture. After the dissolution of the URSS, they created the Commonwealth of Independent States in 1991. The Belovezha Accords was their foundational text. They held responsibilities included certain aspects in the military. Another issue was the Black Sea Fleet. It was integrated in Russian Crimea in the 18th century. In 1997, they established the Black Sea Fleet Agreement between Ukraine and Russia. One of the reasons why Russia was concerned is the Syrian civil war that began in 2011. NATO and Russia military forces participated and were confronted in opposite sides. From a political point of view, assuming the belonging of Ukraine in the CIS and the Black Sea Fleet Agreement was enough to assume a potential security risk between both organizations. What it would have been considered the three-way trade commission as the most secure and responsible measure, respecting the previous agreements and compromises, as well as their freedom to choose trade partners. That should have been enough to being able to judge the context in that exact moment in favor of the Ukrainian government, as well as the consideration of security concerns from Russia. If we would have been able to act from the United Nations, we may have had a chance to avoid and prevent the conflict and war, assuming that we would have judged it without the need to deal with an armed conflict. It was a political internal conflict within Ukraine after that moment, and the difficulty to prevent further complication. Russia decided to intervene in Crimea and Donbass region. This action could be analyzed as well, but what it seemed that we agree is that is the consequence of the first action. The protests from the revolution as illegal movement against the government, what triggered the conflict to a direct confrontation within Ukraine. Here's where we could analyze different strategies, judging possibilities, and evaluating which one may have been the most appropriate for similar or future cases. The intervention in Crimea triggered the civil war that lasted for 8 years, and after several attempts to resolve the conflict, it ended with the invasion and war from Russia. The conflict is directly related with the idea of becoming member of another international or military organization. We could analyze it from a wider dimension, where we include the geopolitical context of the world as members of the United Nations, an international intergovernmental organization since 1945, where all nations of the world belong or participate. The question of becoming part of a military organization is a controversial issue. We could appreciate how the geopolitical context defines the edge between different cultural or geopolitical territories. The most evident is the continental division. Within each one, we perceive the cultural, ethnic, political, or economical differences. The past was driven by alliances, treaties, relationships, interest between different nations, kingdoms, or empires. The compromises between those involved defined with and against who, when, and why they would have fought. Today, the compromise to protect each nation and its citizens is inherent, as we have accepted that principle within the United Nations. There have been more than 600 international treaties since its formation, and they define, among the many functions that they provide, protocols and mechanism to act in each possible case, included the potential military conflicts. Since 1945, the world has been in more than 100 military conflicts, and we're still working to find the tools and mechanism to prevent, avoid, and resolve them. One of those possible measures could be an international normative that define the regulation and limitation of international or military organizations. Not just in this case between NATO and Russia, but for every military organization around the world. The risk that another military organization could create in certain areas could be enough to trigger tension, conflict, and war. In order to create stability between different nations, geopolitical and cultural territories, we should include the international context where we are today. The delimitation could be part of the effort that as neighboring nations imply as our responsibility with each other, as well as our responsibility with our international intergovernmental organization, where we should, through its institutions and legislation, define the cooperation, security, and stability of every nation and geopolitical territory. This is just a general and simplified perspective. To comprehend the implications, it would require a deeper analysis and study from different fields of expertise: sociological, historical, military, political, economical, to understand the implication and have a comprehensive and complete analysis of the issue. I believe the war could end. It would require the acceptance of the potential international normative, delimiting international or military organizations. It could give an opportunity to resolve the EU and NATO accession. At the same time, if the root cause of the conflict is resolved, it could allow to include the territorial integrity, economical compensation, and security guarantees. I have created a fundraiser to initiate a formal research about the international normative in order to have enough academic and international support through professionals of the field that could aid in developing the theory of the potential international treaty. I have already presented to several universities and international organizations, but without professional support is being complicated as it is extremely controversial. Mainstream media is aligned with the context, and this point of view is opposite or too different. It would be really difficult to find support with a remote chance of finding a solution, as it could be easily interpreted as against the international community. I believe with economical support, it could be initiated and presented to universities of international legislation, as well as experts of each field that could back the information and allow to present it. If there is someone that could have a debate, opinion, critic, argument, interpretation, idea, I would be glad to discuss or talk about it, as well as if there is anyone that knows how to initiate another option with professionals, universities, organizations, or any other mean. I firmly believe we should end the war. If this possibility is not neglected or proved wrong, we should continue. There's more information in the fundraiser link. Thank you.